Hi everybody, I am visiting my parents on Staten Island where I have been bringing the tropics since I was a little kid. These palm trees behind me are 16 years old. I just finished unwrapping them and they look great. I had C9 Christmas lights underneath the wrap and I put them on maybe like a week out of the entire winter when we hit that really decent cold spell. But this is the power of good genetics and an older palm tree. They took the winter with no problems whatsoever. It's also in a really nice warm microclimate in my parents' yard. I love these two plants. I got them off eBay in 2009 as a little tiny seedlings. They had a hard time. You know, there was a period of time where I almost lost them. I think it was the winter of 2018 or 19, it got down to 0 degrees almost, and I lived in Florida, so I covered them, but that was really the most I could do. I couldn't really check up on them during the winter time, and so they almost died, and they recovered beautifully after that. I recently learned that one of them is a male and the other one is a female, so I have viable seeds from these plants. They've just gotten so big, and I love these windmill palms. But I'm not just growing windmill palms, I'm also growing a Sabal Minor in the front yard, and that gets no protection at all. I don't cover it, I don't think about it. The one in my yard on Long Island really is struggling. It's still a young Sabal Minor and it gets a lot of snow on it, but this one is just in a perfect place in my parents' yard. I have had it in the ground now for 15 years. I do not do anything to this. So those are the palm trees that I have in the ground. I have a lot more in containers that I leave in the garage. I'll show you those in a minute, but I want to show you some of the broadleaf evergreens. Those are the beautiful big leaf evergreen all year long shrubs here in Zone 7. We don't have a ton to choose from, but the ones that I have in my parents' yard are doing so well. This camellia is called Spring Promise. I actually had this one in bloom in January last year. Weirdly, it does look like it got almost like a sunburn to it. It's definitely not cold damage, but it does look like some sunburn, and there you go, we lost a bud. Even though it just, I don't know, isn't my favorite camellia, it just seems to be really prone to sun and windburn. It does bloom very early. Not all of the flowers opened up this year, but the ones that did started blooming in February. Pretty amazing. This next one is cold tolerant for me and is really the only evergreen shrub that will bloom in the spring, summer, and fall in my Zone 7 up here in New York. This is called Florida Anise. It has such beautiful fragrant foliage. All you have to do is just rub your hands against the leaves and it smells amazing. And it has these adorable pinwheel-like red flowers that start blooming in April and bloom on and off all summer long. And there really isn't an evergreen shrub that blooms all summer long. Gardenias are really tricky. Firstly, they have very difficult requirements to begin with, even in climates where they thrive. They need a certain amount of acidity in the soil. But anyway, I've had a lot of luck with some of the cold tolerant gardenias. Now, just keep in mind, when you see a gardenia that's rated for Zone 7, that is for a Zone 7 in the southeastern United States, where, yeah, it can get down to 5 degrees, but it's only for a few hours, and then it warms up to 50 degrees the next day. So it's very different when you're growing gardenia in a Zone 7 in New York, where the sun doesn't come out for an entire month, and it's below freezing for maybe a week at a time. But I have had tons of luck with Gardenia Summer Snow. This variety has gorgeous tropical-like flowers. Out of all of the hardy gardenias, this and Chuck Hayes really are the most beautiful, the most tropical-like. They have large leaves just like their more subtropical counterparts, and it's pretty cold tolerant. I really don't cover these up. They do benefit from being very close to the protection that I give my windmill palm. You see my windmill palm right there. So they do get a little bit of protection from that. You see some leaf burn on the older leaves. We got down to 10 degrees, but we had a lot of nights that were close to 10 degrees. And a lot of leaves look pretty flawless, to be honest. All things considered, we had a very windy winter, and the leaves look decent enough. It's going to flush out out and make leaves that are beautiful, and it'll really look like it never was damaged at all. I have had this in the ground since 2015, so it's been a while that it's been in the ground now. Next to my summer snow is my crown jewel gardenia. This one does okay too. Now again, these aren't really in the best spot in the yard, so I wouldn't exactly say that they look beautiful. I am hoping to have better luck with my gardenias on Long Island, where my soil is a little more acidic, a little more suitable for them. I want to show you a couple of the container plants that I have around the yard. These stay outside all winter long. I have a Rohdea Japonica. I love this plant. It stays green just like this in full shade, and it's just beautiful. Look at how nice and long these strap leaves are. I could imagine planting this next to a shade flower like coral bells, which I tried to do, but the coral bells kind of got suffocated by the ivy. But this is an amazing plant. It stays in a container just because I think it looks prettier in a container, but I do have one in the ground, and they're both flawless. I don't think about it, and it does amazing. Mahonia is a really fun plant too. It looks like a holly, right? But it is not. And unlike holly, which bloom more so in the summertime, this blooms in February for me usually. It was a pretty cold winter, so I'm just starting to get blooms now in mid-March. But either way, when you're not getting blooms, you're getting gorgeous berries and gorgeous leaves. This stays green all winter long. It's a little bit on the sharper side. It does very well in shade. This is a really shady spot in the garden. I've had it for several years now. Dianthus are really underrated. They're kind of like an old grandma plant, I feel. Like they're really old-fashioned, but they're amazing. They stay green all year long. They have beautiful flowers in the spring and sometimes in the fall. And honestly, I've seen some flowers on them even in the winter time. Speaking of Mediterranean, I'm going to kind of take a little beat and talk about some of the plants that I had in my garage over the winter time, like my Mediterranean fan palm, which does very well in a container. I have 2 Mediterranean fan palms that I got at the same exact time, and look at the variation in this species. So one of them is kind of compact, which I really love. It almost looks like an Everglades fan palm if you've ever seen those. And then the other one has got this really sprawly habit. They were grown in pretty similar conditions, to be honest. This one I just put in a little bit of a shadier spot because I noticed that it had this really open air habit to it. I don't know which one I like better. I kind of like this one a little better than this one, but I don't know. What's your favorite? I'm curious. They stay in the garage all winter. I have grown Mediterranean fan palms in the ground in the past, and with protection, they're fine. But I just feel like they make such good container plants. Why not just leave them in containers? And so that's what I did. I have a beautiful Magnolia figo. It's also known as a banana shrub, and it's because it's cute, adorable, tiny flowers, smell like banana. And look at the leaves. Aren't the leaves on this just amazing? So this also spent the winter in the garage. It's kind of a more zone 8B, maybe like a warm zone 8A plant. So when you see these plants that are rated for zone 8, it's a southern zone 8. So even though I'm in a zone 7, winter low was 10 degrees this year. If that's a zone 8 winter, 10 degrees, doesn't really matter. It just doesn't do well in my climate outside. But inside the garage all winter, not a problem to be had. And you can see all of the buds that are starting to emerge. Just a fantastic plant. Next to it is my Cordyline Australis, also one that I keep in the garage all winter long. But look at this big beast. This is also a Cordyline Australis. This is a green form, and it's very cold tolerant. I saw them all over the place when I visited London a few years ago, and it does really well in a container. They're sold as little container plants. During mild years, Cordylines will survive the winter here, but it's just a tricky thing, and I actually like the way it looks in a container. Like, I used to be obsessed with putting everything in the ground, but now as an adult who is very, very indecisive, I like containers because I can say tomorrow, I don't want it there anymore. I want it somewhere else. So that's the beauty of a container. You're not married to the same spot over and over again. Speaking of the same spot, I have had my brown turkey fig in this spot since I was in high school, and it really has not gotten that big. So I just think that it's not very good, the soil here, but I get figs every year and it doesn't like die back or anything. If it does die back, it's a really minor dieback. You can see this is a fresh bud growing right up on the top. So there is no dieback on my brown turkey this year. I have had dieback. When it gets down to 0 degrees, this is in the middle of my yard, so there is absolutely no cover for this, and it will die back a little bit, but I've never even thought about losing it. Figs are very, very cold tolerant in New York. I don't know what it is. I think all of my Italian ancestors and every other one who lives here just decided, like, we need one plant that can survive in New York that's from Italy. Really unbelievable how big they can get. This one is growing basically in a crack in the pavement. It's just a little tiny planter bed. The soil doesn't go very deep here either. And I have had this forever. This is called Biago's Blush. Actually, I haven't had it forever. I've had it since 2016. It's not even 10 years old, and it's huge. I prune it back every now and again, and it just keeps on growing and growing and growing, and I've never had dieback on this, and I usually get a Breba crop of figs, which means that the figs survive the winter from this variety. So Biago's Blush I really recommend. It's so cold tolerant. I don't know much about the origins of this, but if you look at the little balls on the stem, those are a Breba crop of fig. So basically it means most people get figs in September, October, but if you get little tiny immature figs that survive the winter on the branches, you get those in like July. So you get 2 crops of figs, and the July crops are really big. Usually the Breba figs don't taste very good, but the one on this variety, Biago's Blush, tastes amazing. So we're gonna go back to broadleaf evergreens now. It's called Daphniphyllum macropodum, I believe. It's also known as a red-necked rhododendron. It doesn't produce flowers like a rhododendron, but it does have these absolutely gorgeous kind of pink petioles, like right in the middle of a stem, and the colder that the weather is, the deeper that pink is. So I actually love the way that this plant looks in the middle of winter, because I think that it is just absolutely gorgeous when that pink tinge comes together. The leaves stay nice and green. It doesn't get that reddish kind of color that some broadleaf evergreens get in the cold, but the edge of the leaves do. So it's just the edge of the leaves that get that little pink tinge, and it's a much deeper pink during the winter time, and it almost disappears entirely during the summer. And I just want to kind of spin the camera around and stand next to it just to show you the size of this plant. It's really becoming a small tree. I'm very, very happy with it. I will say that my evergreen dogwood became a large tree very quickly. Like, it's 2 stories tall. It's a semi-evergreen plant. You see that it's lost about half of its leaves or so over the winter time, but it still has plenty, and it'll grow back beautifully. It does flower very nicely for me, and no dieback. So evergreen dogwood is a pretty surprisingly cold-tolerant plant. It is rated for a zone 7, and I would not have expected it to survive the winters that it has gone through. This camellia is growing in full shade, and you can see it really doesn't have that burn problem that spring promise has. I believe this one is April Rose. I'm really bad at keeping camellia varieties in in my head, but it has lots of flower buds on it. It's in full shade. I feel like if it got a little more sun, maybe it would have a few more buds. It's growing alongside a red-tipped Phaneta, which has really, really cool red leaves when it flushes out in the spring. My crocus are looking so good right now. The daffodils are almost up too, but let me show you the crocus first. Look at those. Aren't they pretty? Originally, there was like a blend of colors on the crocus, but now I feel like all of them are pretty much just blue. I don't know how that happened. I guess the other ones just sort of fizzled out over time, but we got blue, and kind of this yellowish is still popping up too. But I had other colors. I feel like I had more white, and this one's kind of like a whitish yellow. I don't know, maybe this is their offspring. Maybe blue is just a dominant gene. I really don't know exactly how long crocus bulbs live. I feel like after a while, you're probably just getting their offspring. But I just love how crocus just sort of grow like in the middle of nothing, but leaf litter. It's just impressive to me that they can manage to bloom and burst up so early in the season and in between all of these leaves. On top of this is a magnolia. I love this southern magnolia. I thought it was Bracken's Brown Beauty, but honestly the leaves are a little small. Maybe it's Little Gem. But I think that's wishful thinking. I really would like this to be Little Gem because I just think like a Bracken's Brown Beauty magnolia would be way too large in this spot eventually. But southern magnolias do really well here. And as promised, here are the daffodils. Look at all those beautiful flower buds. They're going to be looking great. Notice I have not mulched. I have not gotten rid of all of those crispy leaves because... Not because I'm lazy, although that is part of it. It's also because you want to make sure that the pollinators have a place to rest for a little bit longer. Oh, it's a cat. Hold on. Hi, kitty. I don't know how I feel about cats. Like, are they good? Are they bad for the garden? I think it depends. They keep the rodents away. Right, baby? You are so inquisitive. Okay, on to today's plant purchases because I had a ton of fun. I'm going to save the best for last, so you want to stay tuned for it because if you love exotic plants, you're going to be just as excited as I am. But I had some pretty cool plants too that maybe aren't the best for last, but they're way worth mentioning. The pansies, of course. Like, I had to get pansies when I went to the garden center because they bloom until 4th of July without a problem, and I prefer to actually plant these in October because they do usually survive the winter. All of the ones that I planted in my yard in October survive the winter. They bloom on and off throughout the fall and in the winter until the weather gets really cold, and then they bloom like crazy in the spring. They always bloom so much better in the spring than they do in the fall after surviving the winter. But I wanted to plant some for my parents' front porch area. I also have some hellebore. I just leave this outside. Hellebore are evergreen, and they have these beautiful flowers starting in February and March, sometimes January when it's really warm out. This year it looks like March, and they stay in that container all year long outside. Anyway, this is a brand new container. I got some primrose, I got some of the pansies, and this beautiful camellia. I'm not afraid to tell the price. It was only $20 for this fantastic camellia that has bright white flowers, and look at all the buds on it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Looks like about maybe at least a dozen, probably more than a dozen flower buds on it that are just going to burst into bloom. And I don't think that I have the color. Yeah, so the color tag isn't on it, but if you're interested, it's called Miss Bertha, and it's a semi-double white flower. It's a really big, beautiful white flower. Maybe not really big by camellia standards, but it's a large flower, and eventually I'll put it in the ground, but I like having it in a container so that way you can enjoy the flowers. And camellia did really well in containers, so if you live in a climate that's cooler than a zone 7, you could just throw it in the garage and it'll probably do pretty well. I really love camellias. And then if you look carefully, I have my variegated iris coming up, and I love these. They sprout so early, the cream color stays all summer long, so it's just like a really fun, fascinating plant to put in a pot. And this was outside all winter long, along with this ivy, which I wouldn't dare put in the ground because ivy is a menace here. Even the variegated one survives the winter, and it is a menace. But this variegated iris is so pretty. It doesn't bloom as much as the non-variegated type, but it does always have some flowers, so exciting. And this is a star jasmine. It's a star jasmine with a twist, though. Do you see the creamy variegation on the leaves? How gorgeous is this? The flowers are so fragrant, just like the green variety. I have the green version outside all winter long in my yard. Here, I put this one in the garage. It's just a little too valuable for me to just keep it outside and experiment with something like this. I got this Fatsia japonica from Long Beach, actually. I was on vacation in California 10 years ago, and it was in the houseplant section, so it not only was it growing in California, but it was growing in a houseplant section, and it has done nothing but good things in the ground. So I know sometimes people get kind of hung up on not buying cold-tolerant plants. in warm climates because they're like, oh, it's not used to the cold. But honestly, something like a Fatsia just has, it just can survive anything, it seems, in this climate. I really have not had problems with Fatsia japonica. They're just amazing plants, and the largest broadleaf evergreen that I can think of in our climate. They have these beautiful lobes to the leaves, but this is just one leaf, and it's huge. And this is one of the smaller ones. They can get quite large, these leaves, and I really can't think of a better plant. They're just amazing. Whatever plant is better than this for big leaves that are evergreen that'll survive in New York? And nobody's growing them. Why is nobody growing them? They're not watching this channel. I think that I like to play my life pretty cautious, but if I'm going to do something reckless, it's probably going to involve this plant, because monkey puzzle trees are so sharp. And this is my most exciting purchase of the day, maybe of the year. I have wanted a monkey puzzle tree for so many years now, but I don't have a place to put it. I'm just going to keep it in a container for now and maybe put it in the garage during the winter time just because it's in a container. But we have some beautiful monkey puzzle trees in New York. I have seen them growing in people's yards here on Staten Island. I've seen them growing in people's yards on Long Island. Some of the botanical gardens have huge monkey puzzle trees here. So they're quite cold tolerant. You just need to put them in the right spot. Why do I keep touching this? This is really sharp. Let me spin the camera around so that way you could appreciate the view of this monkey puzzle tree. So this was the price I paid, just so you know, because this can be a very expensive tree, but I feel like this was a very reasonable price for a tree of this size. It's pretty large. It's a very slow growing plant, so ideally you want to get one that's kind of large. It has lots of branches on it already. It has some healthy new branches coming up. And what I love about this is, firstly, look at the spiral on these leaves. I mean, they're amazing. It's so spiky. It's like a cactus, but it's a conifer and it's prehistoric. It truly is a living fossil because it has remained unchanged for 200 million years. It was essentially dinosaur food back when those prehistoric creatures were roaming the planet. And that's why it's so sharp and so weird looking. An individual tree can live for over 1,000 years. It's just an amazing plant, and not a lot of people are growing it. It's really one of the more unusual plants that does well in New York, and it won't survive climates much colder than New York City, although I've seen some people have success in colder climates. So anyway, really excited about this purchase. And underneath it is a yellow rhododendron. This one, I'm going to show you the name because I'll forget the name. Oh, I thought I got the yellow one. I don't know how I did that. I accidentally got the wrong one. I was like so carefully looking and looking and looking. Maybe is the tag different? No. I really wanted a yellow rhododendron. Alex, what were you thinking? This is not a bad thing necessarily, because I do think that this variety of rhododendron is beautiful. I was looking at it and considering it, but I really want a yellow one. I really, really do. But you know what? I do have a yellow-orange deciduous rhododendron, and it's beautiful and it's fragrant. So maybe this was a blessing in disguise to not have yellow and yellow. But anyway, yeah, no, I had such a fun day plant shopping, and even though I got a rhododendron that I totally forgot that I got, the Yaku solidary rhododendron, from what I could tell, kind of has almost like a pinkish kind of flower, but it looks really pretty. Also, I got some Dianthus. If you remember, I was just talking about my Dianthus in my backyard. This is a different variety, but look at how beautiful these flowers are. I'm actually going to plant the Dianthus next to the monkey puzzle tree in a container at my house, and I just think that color is going to be great. When the Dianthus isn't blooming, I'll just have like some annuals, and it'll just like look so pretty. And that's the beauty of containers. If you don't like what you have, you can change it. You can't do that when it's in the ground. When I plant a monkey puzzle tree in the ground, that's it for the next 1,000 years. It's not moving. But when I put it in a container, maybe it'll be in my driveway. Maybe it won't. Who knows? Not me. Bye, guys. Thanks for watching.